The truth, they say, has a way of finding you, no matter how deeply you bury it. I've been married to Julia for 9 years, and for most of that time, I believed our relationship was solid. Solid enough that I could trust her completely. So when she mentioned this girl's trip to Miami, I didn't think twice about it. She said she needed a break, some time away to relax with her friends, and I supported that. Julia and I never kept secrets from each other, or so I thought. The night she left, I stayed home. I watched reruns on the TV and tried not to notice how quiet the house felt without her there. I checked my phone now and then, waiting for a text from Julia, just to know she'd arrived safely. At 9 p.m., I got her message. Just checked in, babe. The hotel is beautiful. Wish you were here. Love you. I replied quickly, love you too, babe. Have fun, and thought nothing more of it. Little did I know that would be the last peaceful night I'd have for a while. Later, as I sat in the dim glow of the TV, my phone rang. It was Ethan, an old friend from college. We hadn't spoken in years, so his call seemed odd. I answered, trying to sound casual. Hey, Jack, he said, his voice low, like he didn't want anyone overhearing. Yeah, it's me. Long time no talk. What's up, man? I asked, a little puzzled by his tone, but his response made my stomach tighten. Listen, I don't really know how to say this, he said, trailing off. My heart began to race. What's going on, Ethan? Are you okay? He hesitated for a moment, then said the words that would change everything. I saw Julia tonight in Miami. He took a deep breath. She wasn't alone. I froze, the words hanging in the air. What do you mean, she wasn't alone? I managed to ask, even though I already feared what he might say. I mean, she was with another guy, Jack, he replied. They were close, dancing, touching. I think something's going on. There was a long pause, and my mind raced. Are you sure it was her? I finally asked, even though I already knew the answer. I'm sure, Jack. I saw her with my own eyes. I could feel my chest tighten as I tried to process the information. Listen, he added, do you want me to keep an eye on hers? Without thinking, I said, yes, absolutely. The words came out faster than I could process them. Follow them. Let me know if anything happens. That was it. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would race, half expecting it to be Ethan with another update. The next morning, I couldn't wait any longer. I booked the first flight to Miami, threw a few clothes into a bag, and left without telling Julia anything, no texts, no warnings. I was done with the wondering, done with giving her the benefit of the doubt. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to catch her in the act. If Julia wouldn't tell me the truth, then I'd find it myself. I landed in Miami that afternoon and met up with Ethan. We sat in a dimly lit coffee shop near the beach. He looked just as uneasy as I felt. I'm sorry, Jack, he said, but I knew you'd want to know. I nodded, swallowing hard. Where did you see them? They went from the club to a bar on Ocean Drive, he replied, frowning. They were close, man. Real close. Did you see them kiss? I asked, each word coming out in a strained whisper. Ethan looked down, then back up at me. His face was tight with sympathy, and there was a hint of anger on my behalf. Yes, he said softly. I did. It wasn't just some drunken slip, Jack. They were into each other. They didn't even notice me standing there. His words hit me like a ton of bricks, but Ethan wasn't finished. After they left the bar, he said, pausing as if he didn't want to continue but knew I needed to hear it. They went back to her hotel room. The words struck me like a physical blow. The image of Julia, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, wrapped around another man and leading him up to her room, played over and over in my mind. My fists clenched, and a fire spread through me, one that I couldn't shake. They went up together. I forced out, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm. Ethan nodded. Yeah, the door closed, and neither of them came back out. A surge of fury rushed through me, making my whole body tremble. Ethan watched me silently, a witness to the war raging inside me. After a few moments, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "I don't get it, Ethan. Why would she do this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged, looking just as lost as I felt. "Only she knows, Jack. We decided to wait until evening to see if Julia would meet up with the guy again. Around 8 p.m., we spotted her at a restaurant with her friends and him. They were sitting at an outdoor table, laughing, and she leaned in close to him. Their hands brushed, and then, before I could stop myself, I saw it. She kissed him. I didn't even realize I had stood up until Ethan grabbed my arm. "Jack, wait. Are you sure you want to do this here?" he asked, his voice pleading. But I was done waiting. I stormed over to their table, and as soon as Julia saw me, her eyes widened. She froze, looking like she'd seen a ghost. "Jack," she stammered, her face turning pale. What are you doing here?" "Oh, I don't know," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe just catching my wife making out with another guy in the middle of Miami." The entire table went silent, and Julia's friends stared at us, eyes wide. The man Julia had been with looked down at his plate, muttering something before he quickly stood up and scurried off like a coward. "Pathetic," I muttered under my breath. "Jack, please," Julia started, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I don't even know what I was thinking." "No, you don't know what you were thinking," I snapped, my voice rising in anger. "You came all the way here to cheat on me, and you don't know what you were thinking." The entire restaurant seemed to be watching us now, but I didn't care. A wave of anger and betrayal surged inside me, and I couldn't hold it back. "Please, Jack," she cried, covering her face with her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. Please. I'm begging you. Let's go somewhere and talk about this. Just you and me." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Talk," I said, my voice bitter. "You didn't want to talk before you decided to throw away everything we had, did you?" Julia sobbed, still begging me, but I shook my head. "We're done, Julia. I'm calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow." I turned to leave, but one of Julia's friends grabbed my arm gently. "Jack, wait," she said softly, almost pleading. "It doesn't have to end like this. Talk to her." I looked at her, Rebecca. I remembered her name. She had always been friendly, maybe a little too friendly for my taste, but I didn't care. The last thing I wanted to do was talk to Julia. I was being completely honest when I noticed that Julia's eyes looked different, more intense than before, as if she was seeing me for the first time. It was as though everything that had come before no longer mattered to her. But I knew deep down that there was nothing more to say. I had already made up my mind. Julia made her choice, and I had no intention of allowing myself to be hurt any further. I replied to Rebecca, shaking my head, not even knowing where to start. There was no point in dragging things out. Julia had chosen a different path, and now I was on my own. Rebecca paused for a moment, silently observing me before she gave me a soft, almost apologetic smile. "You're a good man, Jack," she said quietly. "You deserve better." She squeezed my hand gently before letting go. I turned to look at Julia one last time. She was now sobbing uncontrollably, her friends gathered around her, trying to comfort her, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Not after what she'd done. The next day, I called my lawyer to begin the divorce proceedings. I still had a few days left in Miami, and part of me wanted to take that time to clear my head. But a bigger part of me was just eager for a fresh start. I knew I needed a change. Later that day, Rebecca reached out to me. She suggested we meet up, thinking I might need some company, someone to talk to. I agreed, and we met at a beachside bar. For the first time in days, I actually felt like I could breathe. The weight in my chest seemed to lift a little as we sat and talked. Rebecca shared her own story with me. She told me that she, too, had been through a divorce. Her ex-husband had cheated on her with his secretary, and the pain of that betrayal had left its mark. She confided in me that she'd known Julia for years, but she always believed I was the one who truly held our marriage together. I've always thought you were too good for her, Rebecca said, swirling her drink absent-mindedly. I saw the way you looked at her, like she was the only woman in the world. I just don't understand why she did it. I wish I knew, I replied, staring out at the ocean, the sound of the waves momentarily calming me. But it doesn't matter now. I'm done. Rebecca leaned in a little closer, her hand brushing against mine. There was a softness to her touch, a quiet sincerity in her voice. If you ever need someone to talk to, she said, or anything else, I'm here. She paused, meeting my eyes with a look that held a deeper meaning. You're the kind of man who deserves better, Jack. Someone who values what you bring into a relationship. For the first time in a long while, I felt understood. The connection between us was palpable. She wasn't like Julia at all. She was confident, grounded, and there was something undeniable about the spark between us. The evening unfolded, and one thing led to another. By the end of the night, we found ourselves back at my hotel room. It was unexpected, but in that moment, I felt like I was finally letting go of all the anger and betrayal that had built up inside me. Just as I was starting to feel a sense of peace, the door to my hotel room opened. It was Julia, looking like a wreck. She must have found out where I was staying from one of her friends. "Jack, please," she sobbed, her voice hoarse with emotion. "Don't do this. I made a mistake, okay? A horrible mistake, but I love you. I don't want to lose you." I stood there unmoved. "You should have thought about that before you threw away everything we had," I said, my voice cold. Julia collapsed into herself, dropping her face into her hands as the tears streamed down her face. "I don't know what I was thinking. It was stupid. It was a mistake. I was drunk, and he didn't mean anything to me." "It doesn't matter, Julia," I replied, my words firm. "You made your choice, and I've made mine." At that moment, Rebecca stepped out of the bathroom. She was wearing one of my shirts, the hem barely skimming her thighs, and her legs were exposed, making it clear that there was no misunderstanding about what had happened. Rebecca looked at Julia with a gaze that was both pitying and almost satisfied, as though she were watching a person who needed to accept the consequences of their actions. Julia's face registered shock, her eyes darting between us. "Oh my God! Jack, are you too?" I didn't even bother to answer. "Why does it matter, Julia?" I asked bitterly. "We're done, remember?" Julia's face contorted from heartbreak to sheer rage. "You've known her for years," she spat, her voice trembling with anger. "She was my friend, Jack. How could you betray me like this?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You're asking me that after what you did." Rebecca stepped forward, her eyes unwavering. "Maybe it's time you accept that you broke his heart, Julia." And someone else picked up the pieces. Julia's anger exploded. She lunged at Rebecca, grabbing her by the hair with a fierce grip, her voice rising in a scream of rage. "With my husband, you heartless." But before Julia could do any more damage, I stepped in, grabbing her arm and pulling her away with force. "That's enough," I said firmly, my voice steady. "I don't want to see you again." Julia's fury quickly faded, replaced by something much more fragile. Her eyes, now full of fresh tears, looked at me with a deep sadness, as though the last bit of hope she had was slipping away. She stumbled toward the door, still sobbing. When she reached it, she paused, turned toward me one final time with a trembling glare, and then slammed the door behind her. For the first time since I'd gotten that devastating phone call from Ethan, I felt free. There was no remorse, no lingering doubt. I was done, and that was exactly what I needed. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Rebecca was by my side through it all, and we had made a life together. It was almost ironic. Julia had trusted Rebecca, and yet it was Rebecca who showed me the kind of love and trust one had been searching for all along. We moved to a new city, far away from the past, and eventually we got married. We kept the ceremony small and intimate, just close friends and family. But it was everything I had hoped for. It was the fresh start I needed. As for Julia, I hadn't spoken to her since the divorce was finalized. I did hear, though, that she had started dating again. She'd had a few relationships, but none of them seemed to last. She was constantly breaking up with people. But honestly, I didn't care. I was happy with Rebecca, and that was all that mattered now. Looking back, I realized how much I'd grown, how much I'd learned about myself, and what I deserved. I was finally in a place where I could say that I knew what real love and trust felt like, and that, for me, was enough.